Neil, welcome to the Leanpub launch video for learning how to learn mental models, a practical philosophy for learning, problem solving, and creating change. I was just wondering if you could please take a few moments to talk to us about yourself and about your book.
Hi, Len. Actually, that's the first time I've heard someone say the title of the book, and it's a bit of a mouthful. But I guess this book started, when you're on Facebook or whatever, and you read someone talking about something that you're deeply invested in, and you might have a strong reaction. It's like, that's not what I think, and so the normal reaction is to want to reply. Instead of doing that, it's like, well, I'm not going to waste time on Facebook. I'm actually just going to write about that. And so that's what I did. I started to write about mental models and learning. And the title's a bit of the main title, Learning How to Learn Mental Models. It's like a two-part title because I couldn't decide which I wanted to focus on. Was it learning how to learn or mental models? And they're basically two aspects of the same thing. The basic idea is when we learn anything that we learn, whether consciously or subconsciously, that creates a model, or if you like, a mental model, and that is actually stored in our brain somewhere. From what I understand, I don't talk about the brain much in this book, but from what I understand, it's stored in a part of the brain called the neocortex. And there's all these parts of the neocortex, which are like modules, and they're all fairly similar. And that's where our brain stores these models, which have access to both inputs and outputs so that they can actually cause us to do things in response to anything we sense. And before pausing, I will say that the way that our models create outputs in response to inputs is through habits. And so the basic idea with learning how to learn mental models is that what we're trying to learn, when we learn what we're trying to create, it is habits, or if you like, micro habits. And so this book is about how to create habits. It's about how to create habits. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. One thing I was thinking about when I was reading it and when you were just talking there is I've had this terrible lifelong I think bad approach to learning, which is like it's like an existential crisis and it's all or nothing. And I think it might have come from getting graded or something like that, right? Where it's like I have to learn it right the first time and I have to get 100% on the test or I failed. And when I was reading your book, it's like pay it, like, actually you're probably not in an existential kind of moment when you're trying to learn something. Take a step back, think about the habits that you're forming and that it's going to be over a long period of time. And it's just like everything else aside, that idea that like, okay, just be self-aware about what's happening here. You're learning something. And there's systems and processes that you can take on to do that are some that are better than others. And, you'll learn over time and all that kind of thing.
Well, I think that's a part of this of how to learn is one idea. So we were talking a bit before we started recording about different mind states, and so talk about in the book having a thinking mind state, which is I think what most of us tend to think is a natural ongoing state. But there's also the fluid mind state, which is more commonly called being in the flow. And the idea in this book, what I tried to do one of the idea, there's a lot of different ideas in the book, but one of the approaches to learning is to, first of all, if there's a lot of things that we have to learn or a lot of things that we have to do, first of all, pick something, focus on that, learn it, do it. But part of the learning process, which I try to promote, is the idea that when you're learning, the idea is to switch between these two mind states. So you turn the thinking mind off while you're practicing, then you turn the thinking mind back on to look at what you've practiced to see whether it's right or wrong. And this, depending on what you're learning, whether it's a movement form or whether it's math or English, the exact execution of this can vary. Say you're learning to program, but the idea, so going prior to breaking things up, The idea is to break whatever you're learning into small chunks. And normally when we take a course, a teacher does this for us, or the course is designed in such a way that it's broken into chunks. But if we're learning from a YouTube video, so say if you're trying to learn to draw the face, you break it up into parts, draw the nose, hands, whatever. So the idea is, if you're practicing, to break it up into small chunks so you can practice without thinking, without getting frustrated. And that's what sort of triggered this answer when you said you get in this existential crisis. It is the idea that when learning, we can first of all break things into small chunks. That's using our thinking mind. Then while we're focusing on learning these little chunks at a time, that's when we can stop thinking and just focus on repeating. And the idea of the repetition is you don't have to worry about making mistakes. Like, the cost of making a mistake is relatively small. Instead, you just practice, keep repeating it until you get it right. It's like, oh yeah, I get it right. And then you can move on to whatever's next, and then you can assemble whatever it is into a bigger whole.
And is that partly what you mean in the book when you talk about using limits to become less limited? That you could break it?
Exactly.
Okay. I wanted to ask you specifically about that, but you answered it without me having to ask, which is great.
Well,
yeah, please go ahead.
well, just as a big part of the book I use as an example is Chinese characters, learning to paint Chinese characters. So as an example, Chinese characters are naturally broken down into brush strokes, which you paint in a particular order. And what you could try to practice, and this is a normal approach, is just practice the strokes one after another. And it can be frustrating, but another idea is to break it into smaller sets, not even based on all, like, just sets of 3 or 4 sets. Practice those small sets. So practice one set of 3 brush strokes, another set, and then you put them all together. And if you practice each small set enough, it moves into midterm memory, and then you can practice the combination of those sets, and then it becomes, as a result, you can paint the whole character easily without any frustration, and then you can practice from memory, and that's when you can practice making it more beautiful. And so that is more, so you go from limited, so 3, 4 brush strokes at a time, to unlimited. You can paint the whole character you can paint the whole character. And that can apply to bigger and bigger things. So once you've learned something, whatever you've learned can become sort of memory holders. If you're a programmer, I guess they could become like pointers to a data location in your head. You can sort of glue those pointers together and practice those. So you can practice sets of characters that you previously learned in the same way. So again, using limits to become unlimited, or if you like, infinite.
Well, I'm sure we could talk about this for hours, and I hope people spend hours reading your book, Learning How to Learn, but I think we should probably cut it short, because we're trying to keep these book long videos shorter than I'm inclined to do. But anyway, thank you very much, Neil, for taking the time to talk to all of us about your book, Learning How to Learn, and I hope everyone buys it and learns from all the really great, I got to express, Neil writes books about yoga and Leanpub as well, and it's a very practical kind of things about learning in this book that are inspired by over 20 years of teaching. So thank you very much.
Thank you.